It's Wednesday, January 9th, 2019, and I'm your host, Paula Hersey. On Barnstable Today, we have some winter safety tips from the Barnstable Fire Department, explore the wonderful world of insects, and learn more about the Barnstable Business Portal. First up, municipal news and notes. It's not too late to still get a flu shot. Another influenza vaccination clinic has been scheduled for Thursday, January 17th, 4 to 6 p.m. at the Hyannis Youth and Community Center, 141 Bassett Lane in Hyannis. This clinic is open to town residents only. The fee is $3. Now that winter seems to be here to stay, Barnstable Fire Captain Robert Cecil has some important winter safety tips. Those 50-degree weather days that we've been having this winter aren't going to last. Winter safety is really on our minds. You should be preparing now and actually thinking about winter safety before the bad weather gets here. With me today at Barnstable Fire Department, Captain Rob Cecil. Rob, it's been beautiful out there all winter so far.
Yeah, we've been pretty fortunate so far this winter.
Right, but it's going to come. It comes every year. Sometimes it's as late as March, but there's a lot of winter safety things that the fire department really wants people to understand and kind of think about and prepare for. So let's start with, obviously, no ice on the ponds, but no ice on the pond is really safe, is it?
No, and one of the things that we've had an issue with is the fact that we haven't had any ice on the ponds yet this year, and that kind of puts us behind the eight ball training-wise, because we typically like to go out right around the time when ice is beginning to develop, because those are oftentimes the most frequent causes of people falling through, animals and people.
Right.
It's not so much when we've had 20-degree weather for 3 weeks that the ice is too bad. It's when you first get the first few days of the freeze and you get the animals that go out on the ice and people want their dogs and stuff back, and and people having the misfortune of going out and not being safe and falling through themselves and put us in a position to need to be the rescuers.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about that. Really, the ice itself, even if it looks safe, it's not. Keep your pets leashed. Try to keep them off the ice.
Yeah, we don't recommend ice safety anymore. It used to be that the fire departments would go out and say, okay, the ice is 3-4 inches thick now. Right. We don't do that. We don't condone any safe ice practices anymore, other than the local skating rinks.
There you go. There's plenty of ice at HYCC. Excellent. And let's talk about around the home. So if there is some storm prep or storms that do happen, what are some of the things that folks should be doing at their house?
Well, I mean, preparing for power outages. Over the last few winters, we've had issues with a lot of people having power outages because of the heavy wet snow that we've gotten, bringing down power lines and tree branches and things like that, and causing some damage around the property, and making sure that they have provisions in place so that if the power does go out for a few days, that they have spare food and water. The use of a backup generator is a good idea, as long as it's run appropriately. We don't want to see people running gas-powered equipment in the home, causing issues with an accumulation of CO. I mean, it happens, you hear about it on the news all the time, about people running power equipment after a storm and having deaths or near-death experiences because of CO accumulations, carbon monoxide in the home.
Right. So those always have to be vented. You can't even put them in a garage. They should be outdoors.
Correct.
Right, and then the other thing that we know about CO is if we do have some heavy, big snow, that the outside pipes for your furnace systems need to be actually clear?
Yeah, and generally we don't have feet of snow. I mean, it has happened where we've had several blizzards over the last few years, and you get the major accumulations, but just having windstorms where you get the drift, and having the vent pipes coming out of the side of the house get caked up with ice, making sure that people are going around and cleaning a pathway to the vent pipes and clearing any ice and snow buildup from the pipes so that they don't have the CO being backed up into the home.
Right. And talking about clearing paths, one of the most important ones is a path to the fire hydrant.
Mm-hmm. We usually recommend that if you are in decent physical condition and can do it safely and in good health, to help your neighbor out and help yourself, to shovel out the hydrants or use your snow blower for the hydrants to clear around them so that we don't have to try and shovel them out when seconds count.
Right.
In my neighborhood, I know that we've got a decent network of people that go and shovel out the closest hydrant to their home and their neighbors, and it's a good thing to try and practice looking out for your neighbors under any event,
Right.
so, especially in times of weather events and disasters and things like that, to be watching out for each other.
Right. And let's talk a little bit about vehicle safety at this time of year. We had, I believe, earlier this year, a real incident of black ice all of a sudden. Well, how do people prepare for that, or how do they recognize black ice?
Seems like maybe they don't prepare for it, and that's what the problem is.
Right.
The thing is that when you first get the first few freezes of the winter, you can get an accumulation of black ice on the streets and roads and stuff, and they might not have gotten out to sand or salt the roads in time, or because of the rapid development of it. And people just need to be aware that they have to drive safer and take that kind of thing into consideration, that when the temperature fluctuates right around freezing and below, that you get those buildups, and it can be a potential problem if you're not accustomed to driving under those conditions the first time again each winter.
Right. And one of the other things that has been, we see the state police post this on Twitter all the time, is people don't clear their cars off. That makes me nuts. I don't understand that.
And I mean, under most circumstances, you see something blow off of a vehicle and you're fortunate enough not to have any bad events happen from it. But there have been instances where large sheets of ice come off of a truck or somebody's personal vehicle because it wasn't cleaned off, and you've seen them go through windshields and cause physical damage to the vehicles and damage to the occupants of the vehicles. It is a significant safety hazard.
Right. And one of the other hazards that we've noticed also on the roads is people aren't clearing their windshields and their windows as well. I think you still need access in winter for visual in your cars.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not probably the best one to be talking about the law of the situation, but it seems like common sense would be that you would want to have all of your windows and windshield clear, so that you had clear visibility 360 degrees around the vehicle as you're driving it.
Right.
It seems like it would be a good, safe thing to practice.
Exactly, and that's really what it's all about in the winter, is slowing down and taking some safety precautions to begin with. Anything else you want residents to know about preparing for winter or being safe during the winter?
Well, I would say, again, one of the most important things is that we're generally only a phone call away, but with that being said, you want to look out for your neighbors. If there's somebody that is housebound and you haven't seen them in a couple days or whatever, to check in on them and see what they're... sorry, I'm going to have to go.
Okay. Springtails and clusterflies, oh my. That's right, the dynamic entomologist duo back with another episode of Bug Buzz.
Hi, I'm Larry Dapsis. I'm the entomologist with Cape Cod Cooperative Extension, and I'm here with my bug buddy,
Gabrielle Sokolsky. I'm the entomologist for the Cape Cod Mosquito Control Project.
Exactly, and welcome to this segment of Bug Buzz, where Gabby and I each bring in an insect or creature into your view that you may have been familiar with, seen before, maybe not, and we're going to tell you some really interesting facts about how these guys make their living. So, Gabby, for today, what are you bringing to the party?
Well, you threw me a softball today because you sent me a fly to talk about. You talked about how on the phone when we were talking, you talked about how you've been getting calls about cluster flies, or some people call them attic flies, up in their house. This time of year, they come in. You get bunches of them by your windows upstairs. Sometimes they all die, and then you get bunches of dead ones on your sill upstairs.
And so flies, that's in your wheelhouse, because as a group, True Flies, the order Diptera, that is Gabby's favorite group. And And for cluster flies, you had 125,000 different choices. So this is one, and with 125,000 species of true fly, this show could have a long run just on flies.
It's true.
So what's up
There's
with the cluster
so much
flies?
variety, right? So I have to say that this is a personal one because when I first got our house on Cape Cod, up in my upstairs, it was an unfinished attic, hundreds of them. After we finished it, no more. So I'm a little biased. I'm not one to get rid of them right away. They kind of remind me of summertime. There's a bug in my house. And they're not doing anything. They're just buzzing around. So when the winter starts to get cold, shorter days, they come into the house just like we do, getting out of the cold.
Not everybody's as cool with
No.
insects in the house as you.
No. So they come in to get out of the cold. They're not doing anything there. They're just trying to spend their winter. So cluster flies. I'm sure most of you have seen them in your attic at some point or another. They look like house flies. They look like a little larger than house flies. They're very hairy. And if you look close at them, maybe other people don't, they just slap them. They've got lots of golden hairs on their body.
Sure.
That's sort of what differentiates them from the usual housefly that you
But
see in your house.
also flight speed is...
Flight speed. So this time of year, they're in diapause. They're slowed down. They're moving very slowly. So they have, I think, a very interesting life cycle. Just to tell you a little bit about their life cycle, cluster flies are in their larval stage parasites of earthworms. The adult fly will fly down to the ground. She'll lay her eggs around burrows where they might get into the earthworms, and then the larvae actually go into the earthworms, and that's where they develop. They go through maybe 6 generations in a summer, and if you have a lot of cluster flies, in a way that's a good sign. You probably have a really nice lawn out there because your earthworm population is doing well.
Thriving.
So if you have these flies in your house, they're easy to take care of. They're slow, like you said, vacuum them up with your vacuum cleaner. And they won't stink like the brown marmorated stink bugs.
Yeah, exactly. And so the last thing you want to do is to light off a bug bomb or some other aerosol
They're
product.
not doing anything bad up there, just vacuum them up.
Vacuum.
Exactly. So that's just a little bit about cluster flies.
Very good, very good. Well, I'm going to bring something to the table that's a little more innocuous than a cluster fly. Today I'm going to be talking about springtails, okay?
Ooh, and they're super cute.
They are super cute, as seen here in this. So
cute.
they're colorful, they're pretty engaging, they're small. So a lot of people probably have never seen these things, but I'm going to show you examples of springtails. You probably have seen them and just didn't know what they were. This actually was originally thought to be the first insect on the planet that evolved, showing up 400 million years ago during the Devonian area, the age of fishes. And after a lot of research and time and debate, it turns out that springtails are not a true insect. They fall somewhere between insects and crustaceans, things like crabs. So there were lots of arguments up to this point recently that whether they were true insects or not. So they've got their own group, but I'm going to be stubborn about this. And to me, they're a bug, and a really interesting bug, and very important.
They're an insect.
So unlike flies, there's only 6,000 species of springtails on the planet. So they showed up. They didn't diversify to the extent that insects did. They started out primitive, and then butterflies and dragonflies and beetles and all kinds of things. These guys kind of evolved, found a niche, and stuck to their knitting. So they haven't evolved beyond that. Where do we find these things? We're surrounded by these things. These things have been found every habitat on land, from beaches to mountains to even Antarctica. So they are everywhere. Let's look at an example of something that a springtail that you likely have seen. If you're out in the winter and there's snow on the ground and you happen to go next to a tree, and you might look down and see a lot of black specks on top of the snow. You don't take any mind of it. But if you look closely, you might see that those things are actually moving, might be hopping, and if you look closer and you see how small these things are, they're only a few millimeters long. And so if we really take a close-up, we see how truly interesting they are looking. So these guys, these snow fleas, are black, so it allows them to absorb sunlight and kind of keep, warm. But a lot of people don't understand that, Larry, it's freezing out there. How can bugs be alive and moving? And a lot of insects have adapted to cold conditions. And these guys, they synthesize a protein that's very rich in the amino acid glycine. And so this is antifreeze. And insects produce a number of kinds of antifreeze, things like glycerol that ticks produce. And this particular one is unique, and it's being looked at in medical research now as a cryopreservative for organs that are going to be used for transplant at a later date. So it allows these things to be stored at much colder temperatures without freezing the tissue, and basically extend the shelf life, so to speak, used before Christmas. So very, very interesting. So these things have a unique way of jumping. Things like grasshoppers and fleas, they've got really large hind legs that, powerful musculature. But if you look at this, it has an appendage at the end of its abdomen called a furcula, okay? And what they do is they bend that thing underneath their body. So if we look at this springtail upside down, and we see it tucked in underneath its abdomen, and that creates a lot of pressure. There's a lot of energy in that. So if something is approaching like a predator, that springtail will unleash the furcula. It'll snap down on the surface, and it'll spring that thing perhaps 4 or 5 inches through the air. And so that's pretty interesting. Now, 4 or 5 inches might not seem like a big deal to, a person looking at a bug. But if we were to scale that up to people size, Gabby, that's the equivalent of a person doing a backflip over the Eiffel Tower, which is 1,000 feet high. So let's look at a couple examples of some really unique habitats that these occupy. Here's one that lives in the country of Georgia, okay? And it lives in the Kubera Cave. And those things are 6,500 feet down in the earth. So talk about extreme habitats. Here's one, this is a water springtail. It makes its entire living on the surface film of water. And even that furcula, these things can hop around on the surface of the water because that furcula doesn't break the water tension. So a lot of unique adaptations. The really interesting thing about this is, let's talk numbers, okay? For a number of years, ecologists in different sectors argued that this insect has, there's more of these than anything else. So the springtail people had that argument. The ant people also had that argument, as well as the termite people. So as you can imagine, at professional entomology meetings, when these three groups got together, maybe in a pub, trouble would break out.
Everybody picks their favorite.
They do, they do. But springtails win. It is unquestionably that there's more springtails than any other insect on the planet. And if you look at the density of these things, in a square foot, you might have 20,000 of these. Yeah. So on the surface of this table, this would perhaps have 400,000 springtails. So they are everywhere. So what's the purpose of a springtail? Okay, they're down in the soil. They feed on fungal hyphae. They feed on spores. They feed on pollen, decaying animals. They break down plant tissue into smaller pieces and make it easier for the soil microbes to digest it. So they're part of Mother Nature's recycling team. So they're taking all this spent plant matter like leaf litter and other stuff, and that allows the nutrients to be returned back into the soil. So ecologically, they play a really important function here. So hats off to the springtail. So that's it for this segment of Bug Buzz. And Gabby and I look forward to coming back to you next time with an equally interesting pair of creatures. So stay tuned.
Whether the preference is to locate a business along a high-traffic commercial corridor, the industrial area, or in a vibrant small village setting, the town of Barnstable has it all at its business barnstable.com portal. There's so many tools that the town of Barnstable offers for new businesses or existing businesses to get started. With me today, Elizabeth Jenkins, Director of Planning and Development. A brand new tool just launched. It's really cool. As an old web developer, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Tell us about the new tool that's out there for people to find places to site their businesses.
So we just debuted a new web-based application. It's called the Barnstable Zoning Portal, and it lets businesses or residents or certainly any member of the public go in and look at potential places where businesses may be permitted by zoning. So basically it takes our zoning code, which is pretty lengthy and sometimes not always really easy to understand, and our zoning map, which again has a lot of different layers on it. You get zoning and overlay zoning on top of overlay zoning sometimes, so not always really accessible and user-friendly. So it takes kind of these technical resources and translates them into a user-friendly interface that helps you understand where uses are and are not permitted by zoning, and what other sort of zoning permissions you might need to get a business up and running. So just an example, if you go to the Planning and Development homepage and click on Barnstable Zoning Portal, you can enter the portal and type a use. So let's say you type in yoga studio or restaurant. Sometimes there are certain sort of conditions, things that it wants you to clarify, because not all uses are permitted in the same way in every place. So is it a restaurant? Is it a fast food restaurant? Is it a sit-down restaurant? So there might be some kind of follow-on questions you answer there to narrow the scope, and then it produces a really clean and, again, very easy to understand zoning map, interactive, where you can click on different highlighted areas, and it lets you know whether that use is permitted meaning allowed, or whether you might have to get permits from a board, or whether or not it's not allowed there. So again, it's just kind of a way, instead of really digging into that zoning code and zoning map, which can be confusing, a way to kind of get an initial take on those land uses. And we really like to think about it as a tool to help start a conversation with our professional planning staff, who again, zoning can be hard to interpret, and that's why we have again, great staff, planners, and those who support them that can help you clarify those results. So it's a great way to again do some kind of initial discovery, learn a little bit about Barnstable and its zoning regulations, and then get a direct line to staff, planning and development staff, who can help you answer some questions.
Right. I know you mentioned that the zoning regulations can be some dry reading, I guess we'll call it, but really, this tool is made for everybody, not just like big developers. It's made for the smaller businesses too?
Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what it was geared for, was this idea that, again, you can take, kind of the way we refer to land uses every day and kind of go and noodle around a little bit in the zoning map and zoning code, and kind of see how things apply. So, and what it's nice is it does kind of import those layers of regulation. So maybe if you're not thinking about how a water protection overlay district might fit in, it'll do all that homework for you, and again, just give you kind of an initial place to start, and then you can reference the regulations right in there, or it can hook you right up with staff to start that conversation about exploring permitting.
So how does this help your department? I know that it gives a jumping off point for your staff, but how does it help your department?
Again, I think it helps take technical information and translate it to the public. We get a lot of calls from people with initial inquiries, so people like, I think, to be able to explore on the web sometimes before they call town staff. Right. So it offers businesses that, and it helps save staff time. If people are just kind of calling with some general inquiry, they can take a look at this tool first, and then make the call. Again, with the big caveat, always, if you have a question before you buy any property, before you go out and get permits, even just to confirm the results, please reach out to staff. And so this project has it's a great opportunity. One that kind of I have to say fell in our lap. It came to us through the Cape Cod Commission. They piloted this tool with Barnstable as well as Yarmouth and Mashpee, so they could get this kind of ability to look in different towns kind of that are in the same contiguous area, and have been our partner and offered us this tool as part of a 1-year pilot program.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Really well done. It's super easy to use. I mean, there wasn't any, crazy ways to have to navigate through screens. It was very accessible, as in you could use it on any device.
Yep.
And one of the things that I would ask is there, what happens if your type of business isn't in there?
More often than not, you're going to find your type of business in there, but again, it is a translation of our existing zoning code.
Right.
We do make some inferences. So, for example, if you opened up the zoning code, there's going to be a category for something called personal service.
Okay.
So what does that mean? What's a personal service? But if you type in things like a hairdresser or a nail salon, it's going to again connect you with those use categories in the code. If by an off chance you find a really creative land use that we haven't thought of yet, just go ahead and give us a call. Don't by any way infer that that use isn't permitted under zoning. It just might need a conversation.
Right.
So give us a call.
So you do have a couple of initiatives out there, Chapter H as well as the Highway Business Improvement District. Does this tool get updated when those types of things get updated?
It does. So it's hosted by a company out of San Francisco called Open Counter, who is specializing in this, again, kind of taking permitting and regulation and translating it for the general public. So we have a contract with them, and they will update those changes pretty much in real time as they roll out.
And what is the website? That it's Barnstable.
Barnstable Zoning Portal. I think it's barnstablezoningportal.com.
Okay. But you also have a full business Barnstable website, so we won't spend a whole lot of time on it, but there's an enormous amount of tools. And some of the things that we sometimes hear from business owners is it's so hard.
Yeah, I know. And sometimes it is hard, and we're trying. Barnstable
Right.
has a really serious commitment to trying to make it easier, both understanding the process and making sure those regulations are right-sized for business. But we set Barnstable Business, businessbarnstable.com up about a year ago as a business resource website. Just that, somewhere where you could kind of go, if you're a new business, you don't know anything about Barnstable, learn a little bit about the town and its advantages and what we have to offer. And then if you're an existing business looking to expand or a new business looking to locate here, again, some of a clearinghouse for all of the resources we do have. So something we've been rolling out are the business guides. We just did a new restaurant guide. We have a full business guide. We're working on a pop-up guide right now, so it'll give you access to all of those. It'll give you links to all the sort of other regulatory departments, and then it'll hook you up with other sort of business resources that we have. If you're a big business that's looking at tax incentives, you can get information there, information with our partner organizations. So again, it's just kind of a clearinghouse of information.
Right, and continuously added to as you develop new tools. That's where these are going to come.
Exactly. Yeah. So just
Excellent.
that clearinghouse for anything a business might want to know in terms of interacting with our municipality.
So it's safe to say that Barnstable's open for business.
It is.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paula. I always appreciate the visit. It's great.
Here's a look at things to do, places to go, and people to meet. Graduates of the inaugural E4All Business Accelerator program are launching their businesses into the Cape Cod community on Thursday, January 10th at 6:30 p.m. Join E4All Cape Cod at the 2018 Fall Accelerator Showcase and Celebration with keynote speaker Dan Wolf of Cape Air at Cape Cod Coffee, located inside the Barnstable Municipal Airport. Comments, suggestions, accolades? Connect with us on Facebook and Instagram, email us, or send us an old-fashioned note by carrier pigeon. Channel 18 works for you. I'm Paula Hersey, and thank you for watching Barnstable Today.